Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Newly appointed Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre explains how his party will bring hope to Canadians. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau congratulated Poilievre on becoming the new CPC leader, while at the same time saying leaders should not be exploiting fears. And the only Canadian female country star ever to be inducted into the Grand Ole Opry is coming home to Alberta. Terry Clark will be bringing her country Christmas tour to Lethbridge.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. New federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says he wants to bring more hope to Canadians. He also responded to new measures announced by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau aimed at addressing the rising cost of living and inflation. Ottawa's doubling the GST tax credit for 6 months, introducing the first phase of a new national dental care program, and providing a one-time $500 top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit for renters.
Justin Trudeau is out of touch and Canadians are out of money. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. $500 billion of inflationary deficits have bid up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest that Canadians pay. And that is why we are experiencing 40-year highs in inflation today. Furthermore, inflationary deficits are also the inflationary taxes that are driving up the cost for workers and businesses to produce the goods that we buy. On top of that, Trudeau proposes yet more spending to bid up costs even further. The more he spends, the more things cost. It is just inflation.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke about new CPC leader Pierre Poilievre at his party's caucus retreat in New Brunswick. The PM warned that there are difficult problems facing the world right now, and it's not the time for politicians to exploit fears.
My friends, the world is facing a lot of challenges. The pandemic and its consequences, Russia's war in Ukraine that's causing more inflation and insecurity, polarization that undermines our institutions, climate change and extreme weather events. The reality is, a lot of people are concerned about the future, and a lot of people are having a tough time right now. We all need to work together. Now is not the time for politicians to exploit fears and to pit people one against the other. As you all know, the Conservative Party picked a new leader over the weekend. I want to congratulate Mr. Poilievre for becoming the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition. We've been making every effort to work with all parliamentarians, and we will continue to do so. But this doesn't mean that we're not going to be calling out highly questionable, reckless economic ideas. What Canadians need is responsible leadership.
During his caucus retreat in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his party has a plan to help the Canadian economy get back on track as we make our way out of the pandemic. Political reporter Brian Lilly says the PM's plan of spending more taxpayers' dollars is not the answer.
The Trudeau government said, no, we're not going to rein in spending. So what are they doing? They're increasing spending, which the Bank of Montreal, former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge, have warned against. CIBC said it would set an inflationary fire. This is what the Trudeau government is doing. They're adding more spending. So people who need to spend money as quickly as possible at the lowest end will spend more money, which will drive up prices further, which will eventually leave them in the lurch when those subsidies are withdrawn.
Mr. Lilly will have more on Trudeau's plans and the vision that newly appointed Tory leader Pierre Poilievre has for Canadians to give us more hope, according to Poilievre. That's coming up after Business News. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is marking next Monday's funeral of Queen Elizabeth II as a national holiday. Trudeau says he's working with provinces and territories to see if they're also on board. The PM's office said unless the provinces agree to the plan, only federally regulated employees will get the day off. The CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says provinces should reject the move. Dan Kelly says with business owners only given 6 days' notice, it'll cost the economy billions of dollars. He said on Twitter that provinces should not declare next Monday as a statutory paid holiday. United Conservative Party leadership hopeful Travis Taves made a stop in Coaldale on Tuesday morning. He spoke at the town's fire hall and shared his plan, if elected, to decentralize EMS dispatch, which would give ambulance control back to the municipalities.
While there are, no doubt, some advantages to centralization, I have to say this. Centralization in healthcare is not synonymous with better delivery or better efficiency. That's clear. And we've heard the reality, the facts around EMS services right here in Coaldale. If I have the privilege of serving Albertans as their premier, I will support municipalities who want to take back the responsibility and the management and the function of EMS services in their municipalities.
Now, a story we're following up here on Bridge City News, and a story we had recently, is that the Alberta NDP has criticized the UCP for not bringing in enough rural doctors to the province. NDP health critic David Shepherd said the UCP's Reside program is okay to bring more doctors here, but the reason why many healthcare professionals are not coming to Alberta is due to past issues with the current government. Bridge City News received an email from Steve Buick, Press Secretary to Health Minister Jason Copping. In response, Buick says rural physician recruitment and retention is a top priority for Minister Copping, and we're constantly looking for new approaches to support it. We spend over $80 million a year on rural physicians, including the country's most generous incentives for rural practice. Alberta's card-carrying Conservative members will choose their new leader on October the 6th. Now, one of the hot-button topics discussed during the UCP leadership race was Alberta potentially bringing in a Sovereignty Act, a suggestion brought forward by UCP leadership frontrunner Daniel Smith. Independent Medicine Hat Cypress MLA Drew Barnes likes the idea of Alberta saying no to certain legislation from Ottawa, but says he does have some concerns.
There's lots I like about the Sovereignty Act. First of all, it is challenging Ottawa. What concerns me, though, is the timing. The main things we need to do is create our own Alberta infrastructure, collect our own taxes, handle our own unemployment insurance, have our own pension plan. Our own police force is another thing that could be done. Control of our immigration to get the best people in the best spots.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Independent Medicine Hat Cypress MLA Drew Barnes and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after Business News. Well, it's been quite smoky in many parts of southwestern Alberta once again. A big reason is the 191 wildfires currently burning in British Columbia. Angela Stewart is down at Lethbridge City Hall with an early peek at the forecast. Angela, the haziness may be lifting soon, and we could even see some light shower activity?
Yeah, that's right, Hal. We are expected to be getting some reprieve from the smoky conditions tomorrow, but not before a few showers. There is a 30% chance of rain in the forecast expected for later this evening and overnight. Also expect some hazy conditions with a low of 7 degrees. As for how the rest of the week is shaping up, I'll have all those details coming up later in the show. Great.
Thanks so much, Angela. An out-of-control wildfire in northeastern British Columbia is just 8 kilometers away from the district of Hudson's Hope. The BC Wildfire Service says the 287 square kilometer fire is aggressive and will continue to be in the coming days as they work to guard the east flank, which is also approaching the WAC Bennett Dam. Hot and dry conditions continue to fuel the wildfire near Hope, where many properties in the Laidlaw and Hunter Creek areas have been evacuated. Smoke from that fire and others burning throughout BC and Washington state prompted air quality advisories not only for the lower mainland of British Columbia, but also here in Alberta. Alert Calgary seized more than $4.5 million worth of drugs and close to $1 million in cash following a variety of drug busts. Project Carlos saw search warrants doled out at 15 locations throughout Calgary between August 24th to September 2nd. Some of the items seized include 41 kilograms of cocaine, 1 kilogram of methamphetamine, close to 3,500 fentanyl pills, and 4.2 kilograms of cannabis. A stolen handgun and ammunition were also confiscated. A number of suspects have been identified, but charges have yet to be laid. Alert investigators are still in the process of cataloging the evidence. The Indian Horse Relay is an exciting horse and rider team event that takes place on a racetrack. Now, competitors race against each other on horseback to determine which team can complete the required number of laps on the track the fastest. And just to make life a little more difficult, the players have to run and jump onto a different horse's back at the beginning of each leg of the race. Skip Daniels is a horse relay coach on the Bearspaw First Nation. He says that when he saw some troubled youth playing with horses, he had an idea to train them to become good athletes.
These are troubled kids, that high-risk kids that just come from like broken homes and they're just going nowhere. So I call them back. One of them comes up. They didn't trust me at first. I told them, hey, you guys want to do this, with other tribes? You guys want to do this on a professional level? And I said, sure, but they didn't believe me, hey, because they were let down so many times. So I said, all right, yeah, come on. These kids are rough kids. Since I started, that was 2 years ago. They've been out of trouble and clean for 2 years since we started. Because in our culture, horses are healers, right? They have this sort of connection to us.
Sometimes you just need to take a long ride on a horse to get your mind off of today's problems. Well, the Lethbridge Therapeutic Riding Association is hosting the Ride for Dreams event on Saturday for both youth and adult riders. It begins at Pavan Park as they'll make their way to the Old Man River and back. There are some huge prizes available to the riders who raise the most money. That event will also honor a very special member named Joanne Perlich, who passed away recently. Jason Schreiner, the executive director of the association, says all of the funds raised will go to support the LTRA.
We have, for the past 45 years, offered horseback riding to children and young adults with a varying range of complicated physical and psychological diagnoses. That work continues to this date as a result of the generosity and the funds raised through events like the Ride for Dreams. We've expanded into a range of other types of equine therapies. So we collaborate with AHS here at the farm doing mental health and addiction work. So that is not necessarily mounted work. So that's experiential with the horses, so grooming, touch, leading experiences on the farm. We're doing work with rec therapy, occupational therapy, which is really exciting.
Schreiner says additional money will go to the association to help with the upkeep of horses and provide more equestrian therapeutic support. The 12th annual Word on the Street Festival is set to take residents on a literary adventure this weekend. Staff from the Lethbridge Public Library say they're excited to welcome back literary lovers for the first time since 2019 with a fun list of activities.
We will have a great program lined up. We have authors and illustrators coming from all across the country. We will have 7 stages running throughout the day for adults, teens, and kids, a storytime program for the tiny people, and a great lineup as well of local Indigenous speakers, as well as some workshops, live music, face painting, food trucks, and a vendor marketplace going on all day.
The festival will begin at the main branch of the Lethbridge Public Library from 11 till 5 on Saturday. Well, it'll be a country Christmas this year when Canadian country music singer Terry Clark brings her Christmas tour to Lethbridge. Angela Stewart has more from the man responsible for bringing the singer here to our city. Ron Sakamoto says folks can be in for a treat when Clark hits the stage at the NMAC Centre on December the 1st.
Canadian country music singer Terry Clark is coming home to Canada for Christmas, where she'll be making a stop in Lethbridge.
A Canadian at heart, and we're so fortunate to have her come up and do this Christmas tour.
Clark will finally be hitting the road starting in November to promote her very first Christmas album titled It's Christmas, Cheers. Ron Sakamoto of Sakamoto Agency, the promoter for Clark, says it's amazing to be able to bring her to Lethbridge as he and the singer go way back.
I've known Terry since she was 12 years old. Her parents lived in Medicine Hat, and as she grew up, I said to them that, you have to really commit if you're going to do this.
Solidifying her place in country music history, Clark is the only female Canadian artist who's been inducted into the Grand Ole Opry.
We're getting an artist that has won 19 CCMAs, 3 Junos, sold 5 million albums.
Terry Clark's It's Christmas Cheers tour kicks off in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan on November 24th. For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
So looking forward to that concert at the NMAC Centre. Wow. Earlier this month at a Lethbridge committee meeting, it was recommended by city administration that the southeast portion of Parkside Drive South be renamed Exhibition Way South. Edmonton found that there was a large influx of addressing requests related to the exhibition during the construction of the new agri-food hub and trade centre that is slated to open in 2023. The area is located adjacent to Henderson Lake Park. Well, Lethbridge City Council voted 7-2 in favour of moving forward with renaming.
This is not a lot of money. I understand the number $2,000 was bandied about, and I'm just not going to support that for something that I really don't see necessary at all.
Our eyes should be open here that this could trigger requests for other roads to be changed by organizations or groups or something like that. So, but at this time, I have no problem with this. I think it's fitting, but I think we have to be cautious of moving forward how we go about this.
I had to call the ambulance once from Parkside Drive, and I got somebody from outside the city who could not find us when we said we were standing at Gunnery Point on Parkside Drive South by the exhibition, because of course Parkside Drive South, Parkside Drive, it was incredibly confusing to this dispatcher who was not from the city.
As you heard, the cost would be around $2,000 to change the street signs. No word yet on when that will happen. Lethbridge City Council also approved funding for a new electric planning study. Council says there's a need to construct a new 138 kilovolt substation at West Lethbridge by the year 2028. It would be located just south of Copperwood. Council members voted unanimously to approve one-time funding from the Electric Reserve of $500,000 to complete the Chinook Trail functioning planning study next year. Well, the special air quality statement continued for our region due to the wildfire smoke, but the haze should be lifting and leaving us fairly soon. A complete look at the air quality and weather forecast is coming up next. We had more widespread smoke in Lethbridge on Tuesday. The air quality index has been hovering around a 4 mark, which is moderate. Angela Stewart is out at Lethbridge City Hall with a look at the forecast. Angela, the haze should be leaving us soon with a chance of showers developing?
Yes, Hal, there are some light showers expected in the forecast for tonight that will carry overnight before the smoke will be leaving us. Tonight, mainly cloudy conditions with a low of 7 degrees. Wednesday, hazy conditions and a high of 20 degrees. Thursday, lots of sunshine with a high of 23. Friday, cloudy conditions with only a high of 20 expected. Saturday, shaping up beautifully, sunny skies and 21 degrees. Sunday, a mix of sun and cloud and 21. Cooler temperatures to start the week off on Monday, 16 for the high and a mix of sun and cloud. Checking the almanac now, the average high for this time of year is 20 degrees. The average low is 5 degrees. The record high was 30 degrees set back in 1996, and the record low was -5 set back in 1970. The sun rose at 7:04 and set at 7:50, giving us just over 12 hours of daylight. Looking to some temperatures and conditions across the country now for Wednesday. Victoria, fog patches near the Juan de Fuca Strait, hazy conditions in the afternoon, and a high of 19 degrees. To Vancouver, 20 degrees for the high and a mix of sun and cloud. Calgary, a chance of showers in the morning, mainly cloudy and 19 degrees. Edmonton, 22 degrees, fog patches dissipating in the morning and sunny conditions for the afternoon. Wednesday in Regina, mainly cloudy and a chance of rain in the afternoon, a high of 15 for the day. Saskatoon, a mix of sun and cloud, wind heading southeast at 30 kilometers in the afternoon for 20 degrees for the high there. Overcast skies in Winnipeg with only 18 for the high there. Toronto, a mix of sun and cloud, wind heading northwest at 20 kilometers in the late afternoon, a high of 25 expected for Wednesday. To our nation's capital, Ottawa, mainly cloudy and a chance of rain in the early morning, a high of 18 degrees. Montreal, a few showers ending in the morning, a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon, and only 20 degrees for the high there. A chance of rain ending near noon, a mix of sun and cloud in Fredericton for the high, 23 on Wednesday there. Wet weather in Halifax as well, with a high of 25 degrees, about 2 to 4 millimeters. Cloudy and rain expected in Charlottetown. There is also a risk of a thunderstorm in the morning and early afternoon, 22 for the high, a 60% chance of rain in the morning for St. John's, and a high of 15 degrees. And Hal, that's a look at the forecast from City Hall in Lethbridge.
The losses are adding up at Roots. The Toronto-based retailer says it lost $3.2 million in its second quarter. That is up from a loss of $1.2 million a year earlier. Fortunately, sales for the second quarter have increased slightly from $38.9 million last year to $47.8 million this year. Company officials attribute the 20% boost in sales to higher in-store traffic. General Motors has announced plans to expand a robo-taxi service into new markets in Arizona and Texas by the end of the year. An autonomous ride-hailing service began charging passengers in San Francisco back in June. Company officials said it will make its debut in Phoenix and Austin, Texas within the next 90 days. The ride-hailing service will consist of vehicles that will not have a safety driver to take control in case of technology failure. GM bought the San Francisco startup 6 years ago. A German court rejected a lawsuit from an environmental group that sought to have Mercedes-Benz barred from selling cars with combustion engines after the year 2030. The state court in Stuttgart says it is up to the lawmakers to decide what measures should be taken to tackle climate change. It said those decisions cannot be preempted by an individual suit in a civil court. The group wanted Mercedes to stop selling cars with combustion engines by the end of the year 2030. The group says it plans to appeal to a higher regional court. Now here's a look at today's markets, which really took it on the chin today, with U.S. inflation higher than expected and another Fed hike announcement coming. The TSX was down 341 points on the day to finish at 19,645. The Dow was down 1,276 points to 31,104. The S&P 500 was down 177 on the day to 3932. And the Nasdaq was down 632 points to 11,633. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 13 cents to 87.65 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 12 cents to 8.37 U.S. Gold was down 22.01 on the day to 17.0254 U.S. an ounce, and silver was down 45 cents to 19.35 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.10 per bushel, barley's at $8.50, canola's at $17.50, and corn is at $11.73 per bushel. Live cattle were down 95 cents to $144.80, feeder cattle were down $2.60 to $180.53, and lean hogs were up $3.88 to $95.75. The Canadian dollar was down a cent over the past 24 hours to 75.91 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, an out-of-control wildfire in northeastern BC is just 8 kilometers away from the district of Hudson's Hope. The BC Wildfire Service says the 287 square kilometer fire is aggressive and will continue to be in the coming days. Hot and dry conditions continue to fuel the wildfire near Hope, where many properties in the Laidlaw and Hunter Creek areas have been evacuated. Smoke from that fire and others burning throughout British Columbia and Washington state prompted air quality advisories not only in the lower mainland of BC, but also right here in Alberta. Coming up, a chat with political reporter Brian Lilly, who will give his thoughts on the landslide victory by newly elected CPC leader Pierre Poilievre. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. It was an impressive victory for Pierre Poilievre over the weekend. Many would even consider calling it a landslide victory, taking over 68% of the CPC leadership vote. To talk about the resounding victory in more detail is political reporter Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, was the strength of the victory really a surprise to you?
It was, given how high it was. I wouldn't have been shocked at 60% even, but 68%, that's higher than anyone's received in the modern Conservative Party. It's tough to compare it to other delegated conventions. They were different, not exactly one member, one vote, although neither is this. It was a point system. So Poilievre actually took 71% of the votes, I believe, and 68% of the points. So, you know, all that talk of his support being heavily weighted in Western Canada and not enough in Eastern Canada, only partially true. He was about 3.5% higher on the popular vote count because of his support in Western Canada, but he still took, I believe it was over 60% in every single province. It was over 60% in Quebec, over 60% in Atlantic Canada, in the 70s across the prairies, over 60% in Ontario. So yeah, it was higher than I expected. I expected him to win. And as I put in columns and had said to you beforehand, I talked to people who know this system well, who had worked on other campaigns and didn't want Poilievre to win, but said he will get more than 50% in every single province on the first ballot. So I thought, okay, well, some are going to be really high, some will be a bit closer to 50%. it was higher than anyone expected, at least than anyone let on. And of course, it's tough to tell because as we've discussed so many times. Just last week, you said, "Is there a chance?" And I said, because it's such an opaque system, yeah, there's a chance because we don't really know. It's a weird system that they use, but one that, you know, so there were a lot of Polyev supporters who were critical of this system ahead of time. And I've always defended it because it requires you to have support across the country, which is what you need to win a general election. This shows he's got support across the country. So his supporters who were critics of this system before should just sit back and smile now and not call for it to be changed.
So what does this really mean for the party moving forward, having Pierre Poilievre as leader?
Well, he's very much in charge. I mean, look, when you compare this to Aaron O'Toole's win in 2020 or Andrew Scheer's win in 2017, there's no question he's the guy in charge. Aaron O'Toole took 3 ballots. That was, a lot less than Andrew Scheer's 13. When Andrew Scheer took 13 ballots to eke out a win over Maxime Bernier, he had Bernier breathing down his neck the whole time. Now, I've been critical of both men for the way they handled this. Scheer did not show Bernier the respect he deserved in terms of giving him a solid position. But Bernier, for his part, was sniping in the background, thinking, well, I really should have won. And he was always undermining Scheer. O'Toole didn't have as much of that, but a little bit. There's no one there that is going to say, well, we're the real leaders of the party. Or he doesn't even have people saying, we're the reason you got in. Both Scheer and O'Toole did owe their victory in some measure to the social conservative or pro-life movement. Pierre Poilievre doesn't owe that movement anything for his win. He doesn't owe the firearms community, the gun lobby. He doesn't owe them anything for his win. There's no one particular group that can go to him and say, you have to give us exactly what we want or we're going to make noise because we're the ones that put you in power. Nobody can say that to Pierre Poilievre. And that's a good position to be in leadership. It doesn't mean that you're going to turn your backs on these different groups or factions within the Conservative Party, but you don't have to pander to them. You don't have to give them things that will make them happy, but turn off even more voters in the general public. You can put forward reasonable policies that will make them happy, but not turn off the other voters. So that's a good position for Poilievre to be in. It puts him in a very strong position going forward, and it'll be harder for the Liberals to try and paint him in nasty tones, though, of course, they're going to try to.
So, Brian, let me ask you something. What do we know about Anita Poilievre, who also gave a pretty solid and passionate speech over the weekend?
So Anita Poilievre goes by Anna. That's how I've always known her. She's worked on Parliament Hill for many years. I think she started in a senator's office. She's worked for an MP, Michael Cooper. It's been widely reported she's worked for a Conservative MP there. Grew up in Montreal, born in Venezuela, but grew up in Montreal. Speaks English, French, and Spanish fluently. She is an ambitious political wife. And when you are an ambitious political man, that doesn't hurt. That helps you. Yeah. So, a lot of people have called her Pierre's secret weapon because they hadn't seen her before. Now, as I said, Anna worked on Parliament Hill. I worked on Parliament Hill for years, as did you. Pierre Poilievre was a local MP for me. He wasn't my MP. I lived right on the border, but most of my social life was in his riding. So I'd see him and I'd see Anna out in events when I worked in Ottawa. None of the personal story, or not much of the personal story, that both of them told on Saturday night surprises me. It's a revelation to a lot of Canadians, but it's not surprising to me. That's the story, and those are the people that the public needs to see going forward. They need to see Anna. They need to see Valentina. They need to see Baby Cruz. They need to see the whole family and the whole package, because it's much harder to paint Pierre Poilievre as the second coming of Genghis Khan or the devil incarnate, which are the types of things that the Liberals will try and paint him as. It's much harder to do that when you see that he's a 42-year-old guy with a couple of young kids and a really nice wife who speaks highly of him. And well, but he's a racist. Oh, really? Have you met his Venezuelan wife?
Now, Poilievre's message on Saturday night was all about giving people hope, Ryan, and helping to keep the Canadian dream alive, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic. On Monday, when he addressed the Conservative caucus, he said his party needs to really turn the pain people are feeling into a hope. Is that a message that's resonating?
I think it will. Now, here's the challenge for Pierre Poilievre and for the Conservative Party. It's both a challenge, it's an opportunity for them, but it's also an opportunity for the Liberals. Ipsos did a poll, I guess they released it about a week ago. It was done maybe a week and a half ago, released last Monday ahead of the Conservative, on the Tuesday after Labor Day, ahead of the leadership vote. And they asked people, do you have a favorable, unfavorable view of Pierre Poilievre, or do you not know? And among Conservative voters, 57% said, I've got a favorable view of this guy, either very or somewhat. When you went to the general electorate, so this includes Conservative voters and people who vote for other parties, he went down to 23% positive and he went to 35% negative. But 42% said, I don't know enough about this guy. I don't know him enough to make a decision. So that's an opportunity for him to introduce himself. And that's why the whole personal story, adopted by two Saskatchewan school teachers, raised in Calgary, the whole messy, complicated family there on Saturday night to support him. His wife, Anna, his kids. That's why that whole story and humanizing Pierre is so important for him and the Conservative Party, because people don't know him. In those that do, there are more that dislike him than like him. So those are, generally NDP and Liberal partisans. But you've got that 42%. Who defines Pierre Poilievre to that 42% first? Is it going to be the Conservatives or is it going to be the Liberals? And that will be a big determining factor for the next election, because while a lot of people are partisans and loyal to one party, there's a lot of Canadians who just go, well, I'll vote for who I like, or I'll vote for who sounds best, or who has the best policies. Those are the people that decide elections. And that's who, whether you're a Conservative or a Liberal, you have to be pitching to when you're trying to score that home run that is an election victory. So, he's got to try and find a way to speak to them in order to win. That's the key for the next election. So that message of hope, he's got to put forward it in that way. And I think he did a great job Saturday night. I think he did a great job Monday with the Conservative caucus. If he allows the Liberals to paint him as reckless, which is the word they're using, as fringe or divisive, or all these things that they're trying to, then he's going to have a harder time in the next general election, whether that's this fall or in 2025.
You know what I find really interesting, Brian, when you and I worked on the Hill together and when Trudeau took over as Prime Minister, I remember back then the Harper campaign ran a campaign that many Canadians didn't agree with, based on fear of ISIS and you have to vote for us. And there seemed to be some division at that point in time where Trudeau ran a campaign of unity, sunny ways and happy times. And it seems like that's changed now, where Trudeau is running with a campaign of fear and division. So what happened to sunny ways?
Sunny ways, I don't think ever really existed. I've been at this game long enough to know that when somebody says, I'm going to run a positive campaign, it's normally immediately followed with, but not like those so-and-sos over there. So, I mean, that's the way that tends to work. Politics is about conflict. It's about, you've got to put forward why you're the right person or the right party and why the other guy or the other party isn't. You've got to compare and contrast with personalities, with policies. And so I get all of that. But, Justin Trudeau is saying that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are focused on fear and division. This is a guy who said in countless interviews and media appearances and public appearances that, in Canada, we're not the type of country that forces people to take a vaccine. We think you should take a vaccine, and we encourage you to take a vaccine. And this is what we've always done. But we will not force people to take vaccines. And that was the position that Justin Trudeau held until 2 days before he called an election. And he knew he was calling the election on Sunday. And on Friday, he sent a bunch of his ministers out to bring in vaccine mandates for federal government workers and for people who wanted to get on a train, a plane, or a boat that went to more than one province or international waters. That was fear and division. Whether you agree with it or not, whether you are the most vaxxed person on the planet or unvaxxed, that was fear and division. That was saying that person over there is going to put you and your family at risk. And then when Alberta, in the middle of the election and towards the end of the election, was going through a horrible, I think it was fifth wave, things were pretty bad in Alberta in terms of the hospital, healthcare capacity, and all of that. Justin Trudeau didn't campaign in Alberta against what was going on. He went to the Lower Mainland and he went to the Toronto suburbs and he campaigned against Alberta in the Vancouver and Toronto suburbs and told, in particular, he was aimed at suburban moms. If you don't vote for us, this is coming to you and your children, and you are all at risk. That is fear and division. And then he's talking about reckless policies, fiscal policies. This is a guy who has let inflation run wild without doing anything. And I know that there are international factors at play with inflation, but there's also domestic ones, which he continues to deny, and which, with his new policies, which we can talk about in a second if you want, are just going to make things worse.
Yeah, let's chit-chat a bit about some of the new policies where apparently Trudeau says, he can help rein in inflation and help with the cost of living. What are your thoughts?
Well, he won't rein in inflation. He may help with the cost of living for people at the bottom of the economic scale. And if you're at the bottom of the economic scale, you're not going to care, though maybe you should. But the government's going to be giving you more money at a time when everything costs more. And so your initial reaction will be, understandably, thank you. You're going to get a doubling of the GST rebate, I believe is one of the policies. For certain people, there will be a $500 rent supplement, policies to that degree, a payment to help with dental care. This is putting more money in people's pockets, which is what you do when the economy is going south. But for the Liberals, it's what they do when the economy is doing well, when it's doing badly, when there's inflation, when there's not inflation, is they just want to put more money in people's pockets. What will happen with this is, look, prices are going up. Will this help people at the low end deal with those prices increasing? To a degree, it will, but they are all short-term temporary measures. So at some point, those measures will be withdrawn. And guess what? The prices will still be high, rather than reining in government spending. Back in June, you and I talked about it at the time, Hal, there was a report from Scotiabank saying if you only use the Bank of Canada interest rate to lower inflation and you don't lower government spending, you're going to put all of the pain on the backs of homeowners and small businesses who are using lines of credit to finance their operations, which many, many small businesses do. And it's not a reckless thing, but it makes things harder for them. The Trudeau government said, no, we're not going to rein in spending. So what are they doing? They're increasing spending, which the Bank of Montreal, former Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge, have warned against. CIBC said it would set an inflationary fire. This is what the Trudeau government is doing. They're adding more spending. So people who need to spend money as quickly as possible at the lowest end will spend more money, which will drive up prices further, which will eventually leave them in the lurch when those subsidies are withdrawn. This is not a long-term solution. It is something that's going to make it worse rather than better. Oh, and by the way, they're also going to be increasing your payroll taxes for CPP and EI on January 1st, and shortly after that, they'll increase the carbon tax. All of these are inflationary measures.
Brian, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I wanted to chat with you about, there's a lot of pomp and ceremony going on surrounding the passing of Queen Elizabeth II and the accession to the throne of King Charles III, Charles now the head of state. Some people are wondering if Canada should even be associated with the monarchy anymore.
Yeah, and I understand that sentiment. And as someone who comes from a family background, ethnically, religiously, ask the Irish about the monarchy. They're not big fans, but I'm going to say we should stick with it. And part of my reasoning is the system that we have works. If we were to try and get rid of it, what we would end up with is the government appointed a blue ribbon panel of experts who would come up with some monstrosity of a constitution that would be even worse than anything we have now. You've also got every single province has a personal and specific relationship with the Crown. So our amending formula is 7 provinces with 50% of the population. In this case, it would have to be all provinces agreed. Guess what? We also have Indigenous communities, First Nations, with treaties directly with the Crown. They have to agree with it as well. You're not going to get that type of unanimity. So it's nearly impossible to do, and it would likely end up with a bad European continental style constitution, which is the last thing I want for Canada. It's bad for personal rights and freedoms. It's bad for politics.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
What a summer it's turning out to be, politically speaking. On the provincial side, we have 7 candidates vying for the spot at Premier, and I'm sure that for UCP members, their choice of who to vote for is changing daily. When we look federally, there is a conservative struggle for leadership, and then there's the exploration of Alberta autonomy and separatism options. Joining me today on this trip down the rabbit hole is Cypress Medicine Hat Independent MLA Drew Barnes. Drew, welcome back to Bridge City News. So great to have you on.
Oh, thanks again for talking to me. I so appreciate it. It's good to have a chance to discuss these important ideas.
Yeah, they really are. So Drew, we have to kick this conversation off with a talk about those UCP leadership candidates. So some people talk about picking someone who can beat Rachel Notley as a primary consideration. So what would you suggest as the key for picking that UCP leader?
Well, it's not that. It's not, down the road to Rachel Notley, and it's not a mythical fear of splitting the vote. If you don't vote for what you want, you'll never get it. So I'd ask Albertans to step up and vote for who best represents their values. And that's the important issue right there, is let's concentrate and let's support UCP leaders that enhance and promote conservative values. Economic freedom, individual opportunity, families having a bigger role in our culture and our society. The race to this point in time hasn't seen much of that. That to me is not only disappointing, it's also uninspiring. So again, to me, no, let's vote for our values. I mean, instead of these straw men of who might beat Rachel Notley or who might do this or that. No, let's support those who best enhances conservative values.
Okay, so now Drew, you have known most, if not all of these people for a long time. So when you look at the various candidates, do you see some red flags that you think maybe people should know about?
Well, again, I'm at this point in time, I'm concerned that the race has been less than about conservative values than it should have been. I'm concerned that it's been so uninspiring. One contestant has put out 2 or 3 ideas, and that seems to have directed everybody's attention. It's time to talk about lower taxes. It's time to talk about more competitive utilities and insurance situations, so Alberta families have a better chance for more economic freedom and more freedom in general. So I see red flags for all of them right now. Back to Premier Jason Kenney, who so never met expectations, who so clearly didn't understand Albertans or Alberta values. Anyone targeting the status quo is of great concern, of course. But the silver lining here is I think their membership sales end August 12th. So after August 12th, the race changes from trying to sell as many $10 memberships as possible to competing on ideas and platforms. So I hope some real conservative ideas will come forward.
Okay, so you are an independent. You were once a member. You were actually an MLA for the UCP, so you are unable to vote in this. But if things were changed, I mean, obviously there were some rough waters there for you. Who would you be voting for if you had the chance to, or would we see your name up there as one of the contendants?
Well, thank you for that. I'm very pleased to represent Cypress Medicine Hat and Albertans, to be one of the 87 Albertans paid to speak on your behalf. Actually, I was kicked out of the UCP caucus last May, so it's about 15 or 16 months ago now. And I still am a UCP member, so I am eligible to vote. I'm just not part of the UCP caucus. But I guess what's, again, is most important to me is let's make families and communities and community groups bigger, and let's make government smaller. And I haven't seen any of the candidates talk about that. Where do you start? There's 9 American states with no income tax. Oil and gas royalties in Alberta hit $16.2 billion last year, up from $3.2 billion the year before. That's an incredible amount of money that could be used to reduce taxes, to enhance public programs, to make more freedom for Alberta families. I don't think I've heard a single one of the 7 candidates talk about that yet. So that to me is disappointing. And again, my conservative values, Cypress Medicine Hat's values, are we want a government that leaves us alone, that gets out of our way. Jeanette, we're so, everybody says to me, Alberta is landlocked and we were having problems getting our resources moved. The real truth of the matter is we are policy locked by Ottawa and the rest of Canada. It's time to address those things. And I hope that some of the officials, some of the people running for leader will do that.
Okay, so what would be your suggestions then for a course of action for Alberta working with Ottawa?
Okay, well, thank you for that one. My strongest suggestion was when I put out my dissenting opinion on the Fair Deal panel, which is 2 years ago. I said 3 years from now or 3 years from then, Albertans should have an independence referendum. We should just put Ottawa on notice. Ottawa, it's time to give us resource movement. We have the 3rd biggest oil reserve in the world, and we're only number 5 producer, so we're not up to our potential. We all know that India and China, with 250 coal-fired electric generation plants coming online over the next few years, if we could get them our liquefied natural gas, that would make the world better for everyone. But we never talk the truth. So let's make that one of the necessary requirements. Secondly, our House of Commons, our Supreme Court representation is so inadequate compared to our population. That needs to be changed as well. Banking laws are geared around home ownership in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. Banking laws aren't geared around resource extraction or agriculture in Western Canada. The carbon tax punishes Western economies dramatically. And I think the best thing to do is just put Ottawa on notice. We demand and we expect a fair deal, and 3 years from now we're going to hold them accountable. But also at the same time, like Quebec legislature does all the time, they use the notwithstanding clause consistently. It's time that the Premier of Alberta start to use a notwithstanding clause so we get the same deal Quebec has. So we get Alberta first. Yes, we can be a strong part of Canada, but we deserve and need fair treatment. So let's look at the main thing here is to start collecting our own taxes. So we have the infrastructure in place so we can be more sovereign. We have to control our own immigration like Quebec does. Our own pension plan would be $3 billion more annually in benefits for our seniors and seniors that can't afford utilities right now. Our own unemployment insurance would do exactly the same and allow us to pinpoint immigration to the type of people we need, like the type of professionals we need to fill jobs and the areas we need them in. There's so many things that Alberta should be doing like Quebec. I've heard Albertans say it, what Quebec has, we want, and absolutely.
So, Drew, it almost sounds like you're talking about sovereignty. So are you in favor of the Sovereignty Act?
Well, there's lots I like about the Sovereignty Act. First of all, it is challenging Ottawa. What concerns me, though, is the timing. The main things we need to do is create our own Alberta infrastructure, collect our own taxes, handle our own unemployment insurance, have our own pension plan. Our own police force is another thing that could be done. control of our immigration to get the best people in the best spots. Those things need to be done first. My concern with the Sovereignty Act is we're asking Albertans to basically do some things that are against the laws of Canada. Let's set Alberta on a path to be free and prosperous.
Okay. So then, with that said, I have to ask you about Danielle Smith. Obviously, she's a huge fan of the Sovereignty Act, but of course, some may be thinking that she's cresting right now in her popularity. But I guess when we look back at her track record of her political decisions, she's not always had a lot of wins. So I know she's been talking about banning cabinet ministers from the World Economic Forum and has suggestions about Alberta going net zero. So in your opinion, will she be able to follow through on her plans if she is elected leader?
I am so surprised that she's so much in favor of net zero in Trudeau's plan. I was not elected to help Justin Trudeau destroy Alberta's oil and gas industry. I've seen reports that working towards net zero will not only cost Alberta 150 to 200,000 jobs, but it will make electricity 3 times more expensive. And it doesn't solve the problem, as we talked about 2 minutes ago, of getting, good liquefied natural gas to India and China, where so much of the coal-fired electric generation has happened. I'm grateful that Cypress Medicine had elected me in 2012. I was one of the 17 Wild Rosers with Danielle Smith. I was one of the first to put my foot down, to refuse to cross the floor. That was a huge turning point for Alberta. And, it's I guess for anybody voting in this leadership, they have to consider that all that happened and what went down. And, I think there was 5 of us that stayed and 11 that left. And, those are considerations for sure. But I will say this at this point. I mean, I will give Danielle credit in this early part of the leadership race. She has set the agenda by being the one out there with some ideas. And I would suggest to the Todd Lowens and the Travis Taves, and the Rebecca Schultzes and the Rajan Sanis and Brian Jeans, get your ideas out there too. And be strong. And I would say to Albertans, vote for your values.
Okay.
Vote for your values.
There you go. Well, with that said, you have some guiding principles that you promote on your social media, Drew. So maybe why don't you tell us about those?
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, it's based on 3 things: economic freedom, individual opportunity, and having good, strong public programs. And to me, that means choice in our public programs. Alberta's got the 3rd biggest oil reserve in the world. We're 16.2 billion last year in oil and gas taxes collected, oil and gas royalties. I believe it's 80% of the oil sands projects are now past their cost of capital recovery. So they'll be paying 25% royalties to the people of Alberta. There's 9 American states that pay no income tax. Rachel Notley eliminated our 10% flat tax and put the higher end to 15. At the same time, Justin Trudeau raised our federal taxes, for which we get so little value in return, 5% as well. So 4 or 5 years ago was a huge tax hit on our freedoms. So let's get back to our 10% flat tax. Let's end our 2% small business tax. Nobody's been hit harder in the pandemic than small business. We need small business to provide great services, choice, and competition. Let's give them a chance to have some hope and some future. Let's stop all this corporate welfare. I mean, the biggest thing I hear about in Cypress Medicine Hat is wherever Jason Kenney goes, he leaves a trail of millions of dollars of our tax money behind him. Stop it. Leave us alone. Taxes lower and give us a chance to grow on our own. That's what I promote on social media. More economic freedom, more individual opportunity.
Okay, so then do you have an idea of how we could lower taxes and still increase Alberta's bottom line then?
Yeah, well, I sure do. First of all, end the 2% small business tax. Small businesses pay an additional 10% to Ottawa. Not much we can do about that until we show more strength and autonomy. It's about $200 million a year. Is that what it collects? Alberta Health Services last year was almost 26 billion. We could easily carve that 200 million out of what goes into bureaucracy and management in Alberta Health Services. Again, our oil and gas business, we have the third biggest reserve in the world. We're number 5 producer. There's lots of room to make things happen. What we've lost is we've lost the opportunity to help small investors, small business people be stronger in oil and gas, as an example. We've created a situation where they have to have so much reserves to meet their liability for cleanup. It is time to look at a system where all companies have to clean up a certain percentage of their wells rather than just buy more production. Let's not only encourage the big guy to be strong, let's give all Albertans a chance to be strong in those things. Agriculture is another great opportunity for us. More irrigation opportunities, absolutely, for sure. More competition and even some infrastructure. I mean, in Medicine Hat, we're quite envious of Lethbridge because how Lethbridge has grown. And of course, you've got those 3 potato factories, twinning Highway 3, so we can just join up with more of the good things going on in the Lethbridge economy, and we can all work together. That's absolutely something that has to be looked at. I spent earlier this morning talking to people about 2 water storage opportunities here off the South Saskatchewan around Medicine Hat. Those are things that we have to look at to make it happen. But number 1 is government has to tax less and streamline all the regulations. Jason Kenney claimed he was cutting red tape. He did so very little, and you can't cut red tape realistically unless you cut the size and the cost of government. So let's do that.
Okay, it looks like we are about out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us today, Drew. Great to have you on.
Oh, it's great to talk to you again. All the best to you.
Thank you. That was Drew Barnes from Cypress Medicine Hat, who is an independent MLA there. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.